A cluster of teenage suicides took place in South Wales. Naturally, parents, members of Parliament, members of the council and the police were very concerned. They all made strenuous efforts to find out the reasons for the suicides. Brian Gerrish, who lives in Plymouth in England, went to Swansea and arranged a meeting at which he did most of the talking. He claimed that the meeting was about the suicides, but he had an ulterior motive. It will become apparent during this video. This is what he said at the beginning of his talk.
Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You all okay? All right, first of all, a very big thank you from me, well, myself and Mike, to you, because I think the group of people outside must have been intimidating to some extent. I find it interesting. Well, this is my second time in Swansea, but I didn't quite expect a response like this tonight. And I believe that the Labour leader of Swansea City Council is amongst the people outside. He's been told what the talk is about, but he seems to have his own conception as to what's happening. I'd like to give a very big thank you to Samlet Social Club, because over the last 3 days the management have had to endure phone calls trying to warn him off and warn people off from attending, because this is an extreme right-wing meeting, apparently. And tonight Swansea City Council phoned, I think about 5 o'clock, but earlier this afternoon, to tell the management of the venue that I was National Front, which of course is complete and utter nonsense.
So it seems there was hostility from local people who did not want the meeting to take place. Perhaps the reputation of Brian Gerrish as a liar and a fraud had gone before him, or perhaps they just did not want outsiders meddling in their affairs. Brian Gerrish goes on to talk a bit about the suicides and also about himself. Here is some of what he said.
Well, I've got quite a few clips from the papers as usual, and I thought this might be a good opening one. And it was basically saying the community was shocked at what was happening. So you are local people, I'm not. Does this slide capture the mood, do you think, of the area with what's gone on? A few nods, okay. I'm the outsider, I'm also English. Okay, so I haven't come here to tell you everything. I've come here also to ask questions. But this was a slide that I thought they have spoken of their shock and are at a loss to understand why 17 people have actually committed suicide. And these were some of the things that some of the comments that I picked up from the press that were saying that they were quoting parents and friends of families were saying. We need to sit down and think of ways to address this. We need to bring it to an end. Do you think that's happening? I thought I'd try and put very simply, and also because I knew people are going to be watching what I'm doing and saying very carefully, I thought I'd try and put down why I'm here. And what I'm doing is trying to work with other people to save people's lives. It's not just a question of what the young people are doing by committing suicide. It's the fact that all of us at the moment are in a very perilous position. And if we don't have our children, we don't have a future. You might have children, you might have grandchildren, and that's your life, isn't it? You go, but you feel quite happy because your children are going to live on. And if somebody's breaking that and getting at our children, we don't have a future, so we need to do something about it. And who's going to do something about it? Well, the answer is we are. We are going to do something about it, but we can't do anything about it unless we understand what's actually happening. So what I'm going to do tonight is to try and show you what I think is happening, and then we can decide what to do. Just a little bit of history on me, because various people say various things. I did 21 years in the Navy. I was a warfare officer, and I tracked Russian submarines around the ocean for most of my time. So it was my job to be out there with a lot of other people trying to keep the Soviet nuclear submarines away from the British nuclear deterrent. And if you've ever seen Hunt for Red October, it's quite realistic as to what was going on. But when you did that job, you also got a little bit, you got involved in the intelligence side of life. And so part of my professional work was looking at intelligence pictures and putting information together and deciding what was really going on. And that was my job. I was trained to do it. I was professional. I like to think I was quite good at it. Eventually, I headed up the anti-submarine training for the Royal Navy at Portland, and I went over to Holland for 2 years and worked as an instructor with the Netherlands Navy. And then I ended up commanding HMS Orkney, which was one of the offshore protection vessels, also involved in fishery protection. And my time at sea, I witnessed the absolute destruction of the British fishing industry.
And in the next clip, Brian Gerrish admits he has no counselling or medical training.
Let's be frank, I have no formal medical training. I'm not a counsellor, but I'm not a member of any political party. I don't now believe in political parties, and I believe anyone who's elected to Parliament should be as an independent, they should be an individual, and the whip system in Parliament, which is, as I've discovered, not only unlawful at common law, it needs banning tomorrow. So that's me, and what I'm going to talk to you about tonight comes out of my personal knowledge, my professional capacity, but I don't have any formal training in the counselling area. But this is it, isn't it? Something's not right. So I got this little diagram from one of the newspapers, and it was giving a dispersion of some of the suicides across Bridgend. And I thought it was a fairly neat little diagram. You can't read it, and I'm quite happy because there are names on this, but this is a list of some of the people who've committed suicide. And if you were to see it close up, what it will read is hanged, 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 hanged. There's one carbon monoxide poisoning, hanged, hanged. Now, if you look into suicides, and it's not a very nice subject, but we're going to go through it, you will find that there's a natural dispersion. It tends to be males that commit suicide by hanging, and females tend to prefer cutting their wrists or taking drugs. Of course, there are mixes, but there is a separation in the way it happens, and yet in South Wales, all of a sudden, we are seeing everybody commit suicide by hanging. Something's wrong.
Well, obviously something is wrong, but we now move on to the real reason Brian Gerrish gave this talk. Here it is.
Now I'm going to take a little sort of detour here because I'm going to try and introduce some information, and I'm going to get onto this organisation, Common Purpose. Now I've done a lot of talks on Common Purpose, but I haven't really dealt with it with the angle I'm going to deal tonight. And don't worry, because I'm not going to give you 2 hours of Common Purpose.
No, he was only going to give them 1 hour of Common Purpose, and that is the reason he gave this talk. He does not care two hoots about the suicides or about the welfare of children. He just wants to spout his usual nonsense about Common Purpose. It is not the first time that he has pulled this stunt. He has found something in the press that really did happen, usually involving children, and then he has used it as a platform to launch into his Common Purpose rubbish. The people who attended the meeting were tricked into going. They thought the meeting was about the suicides, but at exactly 27 minutes into the talk, Brian Gerrish suddenly switches to talking about Common Purpose and then drones on in his usual way without making any connection between what he is saying and the suicides. Here is some of it.
Now this brings me to my story, really, and I'm going to do some stuff that I haven't done before, but it's very relevant to the fact we're talking about young people starting to self-harm or commit suicide. So if I go back about, probably about 5 years now, might be 6, I'm losing track of the time, my phone rang one morning and one of my friends said, "Brian, what are you doing today?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to be in the office later." And he said, "Can I come in and see you? Can I bring a lady to see you?" And I said, "What for?" And he said, "Well, she's not well." And I said, "Well, what do you expect me to do about it?" And he said, "Well, you're the only person that knows about common purpose." So I was a bit bemused, but he was obviously desperate, so I said yes. And about 11 o'clock in the morning, my friend came in with a lady. I later discovered she was 29, she was professional, she was educated, and she was in a bit of a state. In fact, she was very frightened. And her story was that she'd done a common purpose course. Some of her colleagues had done the course, and then she's doing her job within a quango in the southwest. And one day her boss said to her, "I think you should sleep with me." So she took exception to that and gave him the brush off, but she was a good lady, so part of it was taken as a joke and part of it was a pretty firm, "No way, Jose." And she carried on with her work. About 10 days later, he was back again, and he said, "No, I really think that we should have it on, because I've had mistresses before and I know how to treat a woman." So the lady then went to see the personnel manager, and there was a fairly frank conversation about this man's behaviour. The only trouble was, within 2 days, what had been discussed privately, confidentially, was all around the organisation. And everywhere the woman went for help, she found that things were twisted back against her. "Well, you're the problem because you led him on. It's your fault, you did this. He's a very good man." And this began to play on her mind a bit, because she knew what she was saying was correct, but everywhere she went for help, it was skewed against her. And then she decided the only thing to do was to go outside the establishment and go to some of the proper places when you're being victimised and harassed. And then she was really frightened to find that the same thing was happening. She went to her solicitors and they turned against her. And she found everybody that was doing it was common purpose.
By that he means they had all done common purpose training courses. But how on earth did this woman know what training courses they had done? It is complete nonsense, and here is some more of it.
So I said, "Well, tell me about the course. Where did you do it?" And she said, "Oh, we did it at the Dartmouth Golf and Country Club, which is a golf club that has a little tiny hotel." She said it was over a weekend. We went there on the Friday. It was Saturday, Sunday, and then we came home. And I said, "Tell me what happened." So I'm going to tell you as she told me. She said, "Well, we got there and we put our bags down and we had registration and we had a coffee." And I said, "Okay, and what did you do then?" She said, we played games." And I said, "Oh, this is interesting. What sort of games?" And she said, well, there was the games with the plates." And I said, "What was this then?" She said, "Well, you had paper plates, and we had to write our names and our jobs, and then you had to put the plate on the table in the position you thought it was in real life. So if you were the chief executive of the council, perhaps your plate would be at the top, and if you were the road sweeper, your plate would be at the bottom. And we had to put our plates on the table." And I said, "Okay, well, what else did you do?" "Well, we did games." So I said, "Can you tell me any more?" Well, she was having trouble. So I said, "Oh, okay, well, what happened in the evening?" She said, "Oh, Saturday night there was a dinner." But she said there was quite a lot of drinking in the bar. And then I was surprised, because people came in from the local area and they were very big wheels and they were in common purpose, and I didn't know they were in common purpose. There were senior police officers and people in the fire station and people in the council. And yeah, it was strange. And I said, "What else happened?" And she said, "I think some of the men were getting extras." I said, what do you mean by that? She said, well, I think one of the women running the course was giving the men extras. I think I know what that meant.
People came in and they were in common purpose, but I did not know they were common purpose. That makes a lot of sense. Well, no, actually it does not. And what about those naughty common purpose people wanting extras? Now, nobody else would ever want that, would they? What is the world coming to? And so he goes on with the usual drivel, something about a woman who came to him and was dribbling and about to have a nervous breakdown. And why? Well, she had been on a course. It was over a weekend. It was in a hotel. The woman who ran the course was common purpose. After nearly an hour of the garbage, Brian Gerrish skillfully steered the talk back to the original topic. Here is the point at where he does it.
This is the stuff that children are looking at the moment. So never mind what's happening at school. If they're on the internet and they're watching stuff, there are now more and more short film clips or people with songs and lyrics talking about suicide. And this idiot has got this particular one, Our Love Suicide. Is he talking about our love suicide, or is he talking our love is suicide? This is dangerous stuff, and whoever produced the song and who's ever paying for it to go out knows that it's dangerous. I couldn't play this. We actually had a slight hitch with some of the music. But if you listen to this guy on YouTube, 11 million people have listened to this. He says, if we don't kill ourselves, we will live in a we will lead a mixed up generation. So never mind what I'm telling you about what's going on at school. If your children aren't warned, you can't stop them, in my opinion, but you can warn them so that when they see, that's dangerous. But this is very, very dangerous stuff, because this music straight into your subconscious mind.
And the rest of the talk goes on in the same vein. Brian Gerrish explains other things which may have a negative influence on young people. So what he has done is extremely devious. The first and the last part of the talk were about the suicides, but wedged between these two parts was his common purpose babble. He was hoping that people would make a link between the two, between the young people committing suicide and the activities of common purpose. But there was no link. Brian Gerrish was using Neuro Linguistic Programming.